So thank you for your time and being with us today. Just as a little introduction, this event is sponsored by the Political Science Department. Thank you, Professor Hartzell. I know you're in the crowd, so I appreciate all of your help with this. And the Alexander Hamilton Society as well. So thank you all for showing up to this event and supporting us. I would also like to mention that Professor Daniels, who is right there, he will be moderating this discussion with the minister. And now I will leave it off to my Vice President, Danny, to give you a little bit of a background about the minister before we have to introduce yourselves. So thank you.
I'm Danny. I'm the Vice President of AHS. Minister here is the chairman of the Homeland Union of Lithuania Christian Democrats since 2015. From 2014 to 2016, he worked as a member of the European Parliament, and then since 2016, he was the member of member of Parliament for Lithuania. He's an active member of the group of the European People's Party for the Christian Democrats. He has served as a diplomat to the Embassy of the Republic of Lithuania, to the Kingdom of Belgium, and the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, and at the Office of the Government. In 1999 to 2003, he received his bachelor's in history from Vilnius University, and from 2003 to 2005, that's when he received his that's when he got his master's degree in 2005 in international relations and diplomacy from the same university. Please,
please help us in joining and welcome the minister. Before I give it off to Professor Christian Daniels, would you like to have a few words or explain maybe your path, what you do for the audience?
Well, first of all, thanks for being here. I understand that Friday nights or evenings have a bit more fun activities than listening to somebody in university. But in any case, it's really an honor to be here with you. So I've been asked, what I do here in the United States. So I think it's my third trip this year. This year the second. But this time we've decided with the team that is represented here that we should travel outside Washington, because I mean there's how should I put it, growing awareness as to where the political debates in the United States, where they lead to. And since quite a big portion of the debate affects Europe, and specifically smaller countries like mine in the eastern part of Europe, we thought it would be good to engage with people outside the bubble, so to say, and share the issues, the worries, the anxieties that we do have, and listen also to you. How do you see things going forward? Because for us, really the changes that the European continent is undergoing is monumental. It's something that would be written in history books. This is at least how we feel. And we don't know always whether it's just us and we're living in our own little geopolitical bubble, or really the perception is shared across the Atlantic. So this brought me outside Washington, but also why here in Pennsylvania is because we share history. Since we became independent a bit more than 30 years ago, we had this very strong partnership with Pennsylvania National Guard. For 3 decades now, our military has been training together, learning how to use modern equipment with National Guards here from Pennsylvania. Tomorrow we will be visiting the troops here nearby. Many of them have visited Lithuania. Many of them have trained with our troops, and in many cases, our military, which is a proud NATO country military, is where it is currently because of our partnership with Pennsylvania State and the National Guard here. So this is why we figured that it would be a good opportunity also to strengthen the link, to explain the link, and build it. So grateful to be here, and hopefully I will have a chance to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
So I think the microphone in the room is going to pick up, so I don't think we have to stand right here at the podium, but I do want to take questions from both the audience here in the room and also online. So while you all are asking questions and Foreign Minister of Lithuania is answering questions, I'm going to be monitoring the questions online. But I think I want to start with talking to some of the members of the Alexander Hamilton Society beforehand. One of the things that one of the questions that came up is the relationship between NATO countries and the support for NATO among the current members. So I wonder if you'd be willing to say something about where you see the alliance right now, what you think the threats both internal to the alliance are, but then what the big threats are external to NATO as well.
Well, that's a great question. And maybe you remember in 2018, French President, President Macron, he gave an interview to one of the European outlets, and he said, probably one of the more memorable, he usually says some memorable things, and that was really rang across the globe, where he said that he sees NATO as a brain-dead alliance. And it freaked many people out. It definitely freaked out us in Lithuania, because, we really do depend on Article 5. And we, especially those who are close to Russia and always seen Russia as a threat, we do tend to believe that Article 5 is something fundamental to our security. So calling out NATO as a brain-dead organization really sent a shockwave and raised some very fundamental questions. Now looking back, it's easier to to just leave emotion aside and kind of dig in deeper why he raised this idea. Because after the Cold War, the thinking was that we're definitely in the peace era, and this Fukuyama's idea of the end of history was so prevalent in NATO, outside NATO, everywhere, that basically we are living in peacetime that cannot end. Every country is supposed to get democratic, liberal democracy that rejects communism and then builds itself on very different, Western foundations. So in this environment, you can come to the question: so why do we need NATO, right? Because if you think that Russia is just temporarily aggressive, and at the end of the day it will be friendly and as Western as any other European country, you can get to the question: okay, so do we need alliance like that at all? And even though Lithuanians would always have told you that yes, we do need, because we've always seen Russia as unreformed empire, and one of the last empires in the world that has not fallen. It has went through certain elements of reformation, but literally, it's still there with the same mindset as in 19th century. But for our Western allies, the question might have been, maybe we don't need this architecture. Maybe we need something else. Because the last time, the only time that Article 5 was introduced, it was not because of Russia. It was not because of any geopolitical threat that we perceive as the main threat, but because of terrorism. So maybe we need something different. Maybe something else should be in place before NATO. So now, and then the debate started. It took us, 4 years to discuss this, and we were in the position in 2022, February 24th, where we said, look, all those questions are answered, because everything that we were thinking about is, why is NATO needed? Why does such a country as Lithuania needs NATO or Article 5? Is because of this imperialist Russia that we believe has an ambition that goes beyond its borders. And we've seen that in action. We've seen that in 2008 when Georgia was attacked, in 2014 when Ukraine was attacked for the first time. And yes, for us, natural but not so natural continuation of that fact was the attack on Ukraine for the second time in 2022. So the understanding, at least in vast territory of Europe, really came back that we do need NATO. And honestly, there's nothing to replace it. There's nothing that we can figure out what could be better, what could be in place, and so on and so forth. But it doesn't make us, our life easier. And that is probably, the biggest worry, because now what we see currently is NATO was unable, due to a number of reasons, find an answer as an organization to an attack against Ukraine. all the assistance that Ukraine received throughout the 2 years of war was not from NATO. It was from like-minded countries, a group of like-minded countries that were willing to support Ukraine. So if Lithuania, United States, or whoever is supporting Ukraine, we're not supporting it as a part of NATO. Because we did not find an agreement within the organization. We managed to find an agreement as an organization in 1995 when in what was then Yugoslavia, and we've assisted Kosovo against Serbia as NATO, but not now because the agreement is just not there. So there is a question still. So what is the future of NATO? What is, how do we go from 2022? Well, we got this understanding that we actually need NATO. NATO is not brain dead. We need it. It's the only organization that is able to withstand the pressures from Russia. But how do we go from there? Where do we go from there? So there are a couple of questions. First of all, are we ready to go back to the Cold War times in our mindset? Get away from the mindset of peace, that the time of peace is over, and now we're unfortunately at time of war. We did not choose it. We wish we would be there. Every one of us would wish that we would live in peaceful times, with a peaceful future where we ourselves and our children can prosper and live safely. Unfortunately, those times are over. But are we ready to recreate the organization that spent a couple of decades in the peacetime as a wartime organization? And to give you an idea what that would mean. So in the last stages of Cold War, NATO had roughly 400,000 troops on the border with Warsaw Pact countries. So that's, if I'm not mistaken, 40 divisions. I mean, these amounts of people, this size of military, standing military, equipped and ready to fight, is inconceivable right now. I mean, we're talking, brigades that are moved, from one country to another. That's that's how big of a change we underwent. European countries that used to have thousands of tanks, hundreds of airplanes, now have hundreds of tanks at best and tens of airplanes. We're really, really low on our equipment as to compare where we've been at the end of Cold War, not at the heights, because that was even, there were even more tense periods. Are we ready to really recreate the whole thing? Really to be ready and accept the fact that this is what we need? Because it entails a very difficult question. Let's take defense spending, which is a very obvious question, and it's usually being posed in Europe by our American colleagues. How much are you willing to spend for your own security? And again, at the end of Cold War, a country like Germany would spend about 4% of their GDP to defense. Germany is a huge economy, right? Back then it was second economy in the world, or maybe third. I mean, depending on which decade, when Japan was competitive and they were competing. But nonetheless, I mean, 4% of countries like Germany spending on defense, that's enormous money. Now countries are happy that by 2025 they will reach 2%. My own country, this year we're spending 2.77%. The debate is whether we can go to 3.5%. But what does it mean for a country like mine to spend 3.5%? That means that you have to explain to your people that you will take a huge chunk of money that you otherwise would spend on teacher salaries, on better roads, better infrastructure, whatever is needed, as understood and understood as a social contract between the people and the government, that this is what is needed for us. You're not going to spend it there. You're all going to spend it on defense. And that's a huge rearrangement, not just of the security understanding, but the way that the society works. And this is really big. And now we're undergoing this process. And the countries that are, the frontline countries such as mine, which are closest to the war, the debate is a bit easier. It's not easy, but it's a bit easier because people just feel the war on their skin. You know, we have 70,000 Ukrainians that came in after the war started. In you know, our capital is 600,000 people large, small. So so you can imagine 70,000 people coming in. You see them. They're there. Every day, it's every day on the news. Every day is in the media. That's the number one topic that's been discussed since the war started. I mean, the war in Ukraine. People do understand what it means, and they do share on an emotional level, but also on this understanding that, look, you know, what we see there in Avdiivka, it could happen the same thing to us. It's very, very close. Therefore, rearranging the social contract is a bit easier. While for the countries further from the front, further down west, it's different. Especially take, you know, countries in southern part of Europe, for them really to get this understanding that, look, the war might be getting closer while it's 1,000 kilometers away, and you have to rearrange your social contract. You have to change the way your society works. It's way more difficult task. So so if everything would progress rather calmly, and history would give us a lot of breathing space to prepare our societies, our communities, you know, for this rearrangement, I think we would get there. You know, slowly we would get there. But unfortunately, as history, if history teaches us anything, that when crises do start, usually they pick up the pace. And then this is where things, you know, start moving way faster. If we talk about the Second World War, right, in 1938, the thinking was that Munich Agreement was about to bring the peace for ages. 2 years later, Europe was burning. A year later, in 1941, US was in the fight. And it took just 3 years coming from the peace for ages to the whole world on fire. That is how fast, in some cases, history just picks up, and you don't know. Because you feel as if you're still walking the same pace. But unfortunately, the events, they just, you know, stream past you, and you have to react way faster. So so whenever I'm asked, you know, is Europe ready? Is NATO ready for anything, you know, that might be coming our way? I said, unfortunately, not yet. Unfortunately, not yet. And if there's something that I'm truly worried about, is that it might take an event, you know, that you could call a, you know, Pearl Harbor type of thing, that will awaken us to the point where we won't have the time to debate the whole changes, every change that we need, but we'll just have to be different from the next day. So so I hope that we won't have that, and we'll have time. But then again, in the past, we've seen that these things do happen, especially if we're slower than the pace of history.
Great, thank you. I just want to clarify two things, and you can correct me if my clarification is wrong. Some in the audience, so lots of political science folks here, so they probably know, but the Article 5 that you keep mentioning, right, for those that don't know, that's the mutual defense clause, that an attack on one member is an attack on all members, and we are treaty bound. All the member nations are treaty bound to come to the defense of one of the members attack. And the second part that you alluded to, but didn't make explicit, that the only time it's ever been invoked was in response to a terrorist attack, was 9/11.
9/11.
Right? So it was on behalf, it was in defense of the United States that NATO invoked it. So I want to take a question from the crowd. If yep, yes, sir.
So a few years ago, Lithuania strengthened its ties with Taiwan, and China was extremely upset about that, put a lot of pressure on Lithuania, but Lithuania held firm. And I'd like to know what lessons you think are in store from that experience that places like France and Germany that I think coddle China a lot still could learn from.
Well, thank you so much for the question. I'm always not sure, you know, how universal is the the knowledge about our case on China. So, you know, thank you for bringing that up. So, for those who don't know, very briefly, what happened. So, our government started working in 2020 in December. And we had in our program, as government's program, that we are going to strengthen ties with Taiwan. We reached out to Taiwan, and we've allowed them. We suggested to them that they might open a office, a non-diplomatic office, as per custom in Lithuania. They requested whether they can open the office under the name that they would wish it would be, and the name that they wished was Taiwanese Representative Office. And we've allowed them that. We figured that it does not break the customs, it does not break the treaties that we have with the PRC. The only thing that is different is that every other European country that has an office like that is called Taipei, under the capital office, and we've allowed the way that they want to call themselves. My understanding is that it's about the identity of people. If they see themselves and they want to call themselves Taiwanese, I'm not there to force different name. And they opened the office, and China objected the concept, and then they retaliated extremely heavily. Like no other country has faced what we faced from the PRC. So they enacted a full embargo on all trade between our two countries. No import, no export. About 90 ships that were bound to Chinese ports were stopped mid-sea because they were told by the port authorities that they will not be accepted. So we had to find other ports where to send the goods and everything that they had, because it's too expensive to bring them back. So so there were commodities like peat, if kind of this is stuff that you would dig from the ground, and we shipped quite a lot of it to China. So we had to rearrange and sign new contracts with Malaysia, and they bought the ships out in mid-sea, basically just signed the contract so that we could just ship the other direction. The pressure was enormous, and obviously it became a political problem at home, because the opposition, bashed the government like, oh, this is not the way, you're hurting our business interests and the company business interests and whatnot. But my strong belief is, if you back down to this type of coercion, economic and trade coercion, you create precedent. You create precedent where the same instruments could be used against not just your country, but against others as well. You allow a country to create a rule book as based on power, not legal system, or because we're part of the same legal system. It's called WTO, World Trade Organization system. So we withstood. There was a lot of resistance from U.S. administration, from Taiwan, from European Union joined in, and we really got a lot of help. Not financial. I mean, it was up to us to figure out how can we withstand imminent pressure, but political, so that we're not alone, and that no country would be alone in the face of this sort of coercion. Things started to normalize. So now at this point, our trade has almost back. We can import what we need. We can export most of the things, but many businesses just chose not to do that because of the risks that associate. But now we associate to trading with China, and I think we have written a different rule book. Not to keep it, not to give it, but to stand your ground. So that's when it comes to PRC, but when it comes to Taiwan, we have an amazing relationship. Really has been growing, very, very steadily, very strongly, and I'm truly proud of where we are. Our companies do collaborate. We got to know each other way better. Because Lithuania is extremely freedom-loving country. We have this in our DNA to stand with the countries that support, that are fighting for their freedom. If there's a fight for freedom anywhere in the world, you would see Lithuanians waving the flag of that country. When Belarus was fighting for their independence, in 2020, there was a stolen election. If you followed, Lithuanians would go out with Belarusian flags. Now it's all about Ukraine. Now every Lithuanian has a Ukrainian flag and goes out, when it was Georgia's, 2008 attack against Georgia, Lithuanians, all the Lithuanians were driving with Georgian flags in the out of their cars, and it's a DNA. It's nothing to do with the government. It's the people just feel very strongly about this. So there's this natural connection between Taiwan and Lithuania, which I think really play. And and I hope that for the future, other countries will learn from this. That giving in either to China or to Russia, it never pays off. It just brings additional, payments, which will be bigger in the future. That's why we use exactly the same argument when it comes to now those who talk about Ukraine. Oh, maybe negotiations would be, needed. I mean, it's not up to me to say, but I can tell you this: that if Ukraine is forced to negotiate, that will be just the delay of next phase of war. Why? Because you either win this, either you withstand this with the support of your allies, or Russia will win. There's just black and white. Unfortunately, there's no middle ground.
Great, thank you. So you mentioned Georgia, the country of Georgia, a couple of times, and again, I think many in the room would probably know, but maybe not all. Russia's still there, right? I mean, the aggression against Georgia has not been reversed, right? It's sort of an ongoing, low intensity situation. So, certainly precursor.
Well, I mean, Russia has not been hiding, trying to hide its intentions. Since 2008, and when they first attacked an independent neighboring country, occupied parts of the country, threatened to attack the capital, and they stopped some 20 kilometers from Georgian capital of Tbilisi. And the biggest problem was that you would have heard any Baltic representative saying exactly the same thing that I'm saying right now. We're not surprised. This is Russia that we know. This is an imperialistic country as bent on attacking its neighbors. And we're like, nah, you're paranoid. Okay, 2014, same thing again. Any and every Baltic representative that was out there would have told you exactly the same thing. I was a member of the European Parliament back then, and I was speaking exactly the same words. We're that unoriginal. We were saying, look, this is, how many times do you have to see the same thing happening all over again for you to believe that this is a reality? How many times? No. You're paranoid, this will be fine. This is the last time the Russians actually win. And now we're saying the same thing. This is not about to end. Russia is not about to stop. They're mobilizing additional troops. They will do anything and everything to get back the greatness that is in their minds. And the greatness that they have in their minds is in 19th century Russia that, spanned from Japan to wherever. Who knows? Moon. So this is what they're getting at. And again, unfortunately, we're saying, look, you sound a little bit paranoid there. So we're hoping that this time will be heard, but who knows?
So one of the questions from the feed, talking about Lithuania's push for greater energy independence, right? So for a long time, Lithuania has been dependent on energy supplies from Russia, from Gazprom. So can you talk a little bit about the ongoing efforts and what sort of a time frame you're looking at for perhaps achieving energy independence?
Well, thank you for a great question. So when both countries were integrated into, occupied and integrated in the Soviet economic sphere, we were also integrated into the energy economic sphere, meaning that we were hooked on a single pipeline where we would receive our gas, a single electricity grid, oil pipelines, everything. We were just part of something, the Soviet monster, really big system, and we were just, part of it. So when we broke free, the problem was that it was really expensive and difficult to cut off ties, because you would have to build a lot of infrastructure that's incredibly expensive, especially for the countries that are recovering from, the decades of being non-free. So it normally would take a while. And what happened was that in 2008, Lithuania was dependent on single gas provider, and we're a cold country. We're a northern country, so we use a lot of gas for heating in order to to heat our homes, because we do that almost half a year, at least 5 months. That's for sure. Otherwise, we would freeze it up. So what Russia started doing is they started increasing the price of gas whenever they did not like the decisions that we would make. So they don't like the government that is being elected, that's formed after the election. They hike up the price. And at some point in 2008, 2009, so if you remember, that was a time of big economic difficulties all across the world. We were paying the highest price for natural gas in Europe, and the country being back then definitely not the richest in Europe. So it's a very, very high, difficult thing, either coming from your own pocket or from the government, which needs to compensate, to the people who are unable to afford, heating their homes. So it was a politically manipulated energy price. So the government back then took a decision which was extremely costly and seemed, very far out. We started building with a Korean company of Hyundai a floating LNG terminal. Basically, it's a ship that can convert liquefied natural gas into the gasified form that you would use to heat your home. So you don't need, it's like a factory in the ship. Normally you would have you would build a factory, but this factory in the ship is a bit cheaper to have it in the ship. And it was absolutely new technology, and we were the first country to build this in the region. Definitely in Europe, I'm not sure. Maybe Spain had something similar. So in 2014, the ship arrived and it became operational, and it's still operational. And it's called Independence. Guess why? Since then, we're paying market price, which is way, way lower than anything that we used to pay before acquiring the ship. Because now the gas comes from the United States, Freeport, in Louisiana, Norway, Northern Africa, Algiers, I don't even know. I mean, anywhere where the price is good, we purchase. The ship with liquefied natural gas comes to the port, connects to the ship that we had in the port. It gasifies, and we heat our homes, or supply the industry, or whatever. Since it's already 10 years that we had the ship, and we've been early adopters of the technology, we built up certain know-how. And when Russians, when Russians attacked Ukraine, and Europe decided that we will switch off Russian gas, and many other countries in Europe decided to switch off Russian gas, they started building exactly the same ships as we do have. But they do not have the know-how how to operate the ships. So now Lithuania is operating 2 ships in Germany. Exactly the same ships, but just we know how to operate them. And it's good business, honestly. So it has been a great success story. So now we're completely free from Russian gas, Russian oil. And the only last thing that is left is that we're still part of the Russian electricity grid, that we are looking we're planning to turn it off in 2025. For that, we needed 2 interconnectors with Poland, our southern neighbor. One is already built, second is being built, and when both are operational, we will cut off the last ties to Russian electricity grid. And then we're completely free.
Great, thank you. Since you spoke of the electricity grid, I must comment on Professor Valdiduonis, who is our own Lithuanian professor who happens to be on leave, which is why he's not here to greet you all. But he does work on electricity markets in general, but he has some projects with faculty at University of Vilnius on the Lithuanian electricity market. Other questions from the room?
So just a quick question. You speak a lot about NATO and how important NATO is. I would tend to agree. My question for you is, to what extent do you think like NATO's greatest contribution is to the alliance in terms of a warfare domain or perhaps like a certain platform that you specialize in?
Well, as a political answer, it would be that the biggest donation from NATO that we're getting is the natural deterrence that nobody wants to test Article 5, which maybe many outside NATO do not know how it would work, but it's a good thing. We have a nuclear alliance that has the biggest declared military capacity in the world and probably in the history. And this is what you don't want to mess with. Practically, where we are currently, because the situation is changing, right? And I talked before that one thing is to have a military alliance in peacetime, right? When you have a possibility to talk about brain dead and whatnot, and there's a bit of difference when you have actually a wartime, and how do you adapt? So the biggest change that has happened since invasion of Ukraine was that in last year, NATO has adopted what is called regional plans. So that means that every country, every chief of defense in every country, and most of the military leadership in NATO know what would happen. Scenario this, scenario that, and so many other things. But this is what we didn't have. So that means that we are getting ready to defend. The alliances, the gears are starting to move towards better defense. The biggest worry is that we don't know how much time we have. Because we're democratic countries, it takes a while. We talked about social contract. That means we need money that's not easily available. We have to convince people to actually give this money to to government to spend, and so many other things. So things are moving, things are changing. The regional plans are in place. Now we need to fill them up with the capacities, all right? So that every country that is in the plan would have actually devoted the military that is needed for those plans to be actionable, and equipment and ammunition and everything else that is needed. Technologically, NATO is by far more advanced than any possible foe that NATO would have to stand against.
So I want to follow up because there were a couple of questions from the feed related to this, and I don't want to bog down just on NATO issues, but given the recent expansion in NATO, there's concern that by expanding NATO, you expand the risk, right? You expand the alliance, but you expand the risk that one will be attacked. There's also concern from the questioner about, does expanding the alliance too far hollow it out in any way? So can you speak about the pros and cons of expansion?
Well, the first thing about expansion, I'd like to change a bit wording that NATO, NATO's expansion is not like Russian expansion. Russia expands, right? It invades territories. It occupies them, and then it, just forces them to be part of Russia. NATO doesn't work like that. The countries decide democratically that they would like to be in NATO. So it's like, pulling the blanket on yourself, not somebody throwing it on you. And it's important. Why? Because Russians are always using the same narrative. Oh, NATO is expanding on us. No. Countries that are close to you are worried that you might attack them, and that's why they want NATO to defend them. That is the way it works. That's number one. The second thing is that we come to understand that European continent cannot be safe if one of the countries is not safe. And this is what probably led to Sweden and Finland joining NATO. Right? You cannot imagine that Finland being under threat, God forbid, under attack, and the whole NATO then just kind of relaxed. Oh, fine. At least it's not us. It doesn't work like that. And therefore, you would hear us always also saying exactly the same thing about Ukraine, right? It's naive to think that Ukraine being under threat, even after the war has been over, would somehow, make our situation in Europe better. It's either we are together safe or we are not. So this is why you would see countries, knocking on the door and then asking to be let in. Third thing is that when there are new countries joining in, we have to consider what they're bringing into the alliance. Obviously, it cannot be that either the United States or the bigger allies such as UK, France, Germany, just taking care of new and new countries, more and more territory and more borders. You have to really tell what you're bringing on the table, and therefore, when we're talking about Finland, with, if I'm not mistaken, 900,000 people of reserve, that means that the people out of 4 million people country, one fourth that's went through training, the military training. Well, that's significant. That they're bringing a lot, and add to that aviation, with the modern fleet of F-35s, naval forces, and so many other things. Finland is a formidable military power. Be it not the largest one, but they pack a punch, and they packed it during the Winter War, straight into the teeth of Soviet Russia. Sweden, again, technologically super advanced, with modern airplanes that they produce themselves, with submarines that they produce themselves. So they're not just military power, but also industrial power. So it's clear. Now when we talk about Ukraine, and it's the most difficult discussion, right? Because so many people would say, oh, we cannot, defend Ukraine right now because, they're vulnerable and so on and so forth. It would be very difficult to defend. Ukraine currently has the biggest military force in European continent, apart from probably the only other country that you would consider, if you can consider it European, is Russia. About 1 million people went through not training, not reserve, but actually military fighting. With most of the fighting has been going with NATO equipment, NATO weapons, NATO standard weapons. So that's a lot. This is something that nobody else has, apart from probably apart from the United States. So if you were to look, into the future and ask yourself, is there something that Ukraine is bringing to NATO? Oh yes, definitely. All the knowledge, all the know-how, all the capacity, and I would be proud that my country would stand together with Ukraine defending allied territory and being under the same Article 5.
Thank you. From the room. Yes.
Yeah. How do you think that Vladimir Putin of Russia is reacting to the fact that Finland is now NATO territory, which I think obviously makes a lot of sense for NATO, but that kind of makes his access to the Baltic states are going to become very limited. So do you think that would mean that he would possibly escape Finland? Or I just feel like that would be if you're with Russia, that's something you're gonna have to do, because I just don't see any way he has access really to the Baltic and eventually the Atlantic. Unless you go up and around.
Yeah, well, of course, his access now to the Baltic Seas is way more limited than it was in the past. Sorry,
it's a good thing.
It's a good thing, definitely. We tend to think that the Baltic states are probably the most vulnerable when it comes to how, because there's this thing that's called strategic depth. That means that how fast the invading country could move in and take parts of the territory. And when you take a country like Norway, for example, which has thousands of kilometers of strategic depth, basically that they can retract and go back and then counterattack when they feel ready. Lithuania is 300 kilometers. It's 4 hours drive from the border to the border. It's a very small country. At this stage, we believe that Putin does not want to test the military might of NATO because of the technological advance. Air superiority, missile superiority, definitely NATO has that. But his temptation might come from perceived political weakness and lengthy democratic processes within our societies. This is what this is why it's worrying the debate that is happening in Congress. This is why it's worrying that all the discussions that are taking place in Brussels or in Berlin or maybe not at this point in my country, but who knows? I mean, it's democracy. The coalition might form that would be just unable to to get to a position, to formulate a position, and he might bet on that if there's push on NATO, and we suddenly just fall apart politically, unable to we have the might, but we're not able to use it because we cannot agree. So this is also worrying, and this is why we're also pushing for us to have a political answer in Ukraine, because it also deters. Right, we're not only militarily strong, we're also politically strong. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's a whole new world now, and we have to adapt to the lots of new thinking as to what he might do, and how we might or should react to what's happening.
So there's I believe, like in the United States, you have an election in 2024.
Yes.
So one concern that has come up around the world is election interference from bad actors outside. Can you speak to that, whether it's the Russian threat or other either state or non-state actors, and what the concerns are, and without revealing secrets, what is being done to counter this?
So yeah, definitely. I mean, we've seen that, and in the past, not just in Lithuania, not just in Europe, also here in the United States, there's a huge interest by bad actors to influence the democratic processes all over, because they perceive that as some sort of a weakness that we do have. It's easy to talk to us when we're all excited, and choosing the next leadership, next administration. So you just pour in some misinformation or just flat out lies, and then you sit out and see what's happening. So you basically don't need to be an active participant, but you can be a passive actor that is influencing, and they've seen that work quite effectively. We had our share of this, I'd say, about 20 years ago. And the funny story is that when we first figured out that that somebody is meddling in our political processes, and we reached out to partners. In many cases, we were told, look, you're just young democracy, you're learning the ropes, it takes a while. Just do your thing, learn democracy. We can teach you a thing. And we're like, yeah, I mean, it's way more difficult when there's this guy in the room, and doing stuff and spreading lies and doing whatnot. I mean, but we were we were left alone because we were test ground. What we did, one of the things that we did, we've seen that the most, there was not much of social media back then, right? Early years of Facebook, and that was probably it. So we've seen that there is an interference that's coming from businesses, from private businesses, who would have ties with bad actors, and they would be interested in influencing political parties and by financing, bribing, who knows what. Most of it was legal, but the interest behind it was not necessarily good for the country, or aligned with the country's interests. So what we did is that we removed the possibility for private businesses to fund the election. So it's all state funded. It's extremely boring because there's no money. Nobody has any money because the state, there's a formula. And every party, every candidate, now it could be presidential election, parliament election, and you get the amount of money, and it's very, very limited, and you cannot go a cent beyond that. if you go and, your opponents would see that, and then you could be thrown out of the election completely. So you have to be either extremely creative, it's very difficult with that, limited amount of money, but it's extremely transparent. Everybody knows what everybody else has, right? And then you got it from the same source. It's state budget. That's it. So, but that's it. We basically sealed the system off from the actors like that. This year, we have election actually at the same time as you will in October. We might be seeing a little more interest by the countries further to the east, not from Russia, but mostly from the peers. They are interested. They are interested in the outcome of elections, mainly due to the foreign policy decisions. They could, they wish that some of the parties would form a coalition that would have a different outlook to foreign policy and maybe change the name of the representative office. Who knows? So they are interested, definitely. We're yet to see how much of active or passive measures they will take. It's still early to say that, but the interest is definitely
from the room.
The European Parliament is having their elections this year also, at least in the United States and in Europe. There's a lot of interest in it because of the rise of conservative parties in Europe. Could you speak to that and the rise of conservative movements throughout Western Europe and Eastern Europe?
Yeah. It's been a concern since I'd say 2014, because this was the first time that Europe actually faced real migratory changes, huge migratory changes, which in turn influenced more far right movements. When it was civil war in Syria started, and that led to millions of people being displaced, and then millions actually choosing Europe as their destination, for just any livelihood, and that I can tell that freaked many people out, and they were looking for something, different, and since it happened so that the parties that took the decisions to allow people in, especially in Germany, they were right-wing parties, center-right. Chancellor Merkel, she's from CDU, which is a conservative party. So basically, if you vote center-right, in most cases you would be the one, kind of more cautious about migration, and you would expect your party to listen to you. And if you're not getting that response, then center left definitely won't have that answer. So where do you go, right? You have to, move even further to the right, and this gave rise, right? So we've seen the rise of AfD, alternative for Germany, and in Germany, and then so many other Le Pen and her movement in France, and so many others across Europe. So that happened. Some of those parties, stabilized, became more traditionally accepted. Basically, they expanded their electoral base, many more topics that they talk about. Not just, they might be anti-Green Deal or a couple of other things. Basically, so now they have this space carved for themselves. And the thing is that currently migration is still a rather big issue, especially in the countries of Southern Europe and parts of Western Europe. It has not gone away. Europe was unable to find a clear answer as to what to do, apart from making agreements with the countries that some of the migration flows go through, such as Turkey or Tunisia. So basically, we tried to make an arrangement with a country that migrants would go through, and that they would be stopped there and not reaching Europe. I'm not sure how sustainable is the strategy, because it puts a lot of leverage on us, meaning that if the country is at odds with Europe, it can just open the door and suggest people moving ahead, and then we have a political problem. So have difficulties to keep up. So it is an initiative fuels far right parties, or more to the right, because not everybody is as far right as but I mean, it could be that the ECR group, which is European Conservatives and Reformists, if I'm not mistaken, is what is called the more right than Christian Democrats, where I'm coming from. They could have a stronger seating in the next European Parliament. That could happen. This is at least what is being predicted. Now, when it comes to migration, I can just tell you, certain things that just one number. There are about 12 million people in Egypt that are being displaced from everywhere else, and they're currently being held in, they're in Egypt, and there's almost no social system as to how to care for those people, so they're just there, and Europe is just outside, just one sea away, and so I don't think that we've seen the last of it. And it could be very problematic in the future if we don't manage to find a sustainable answer as how we are going to deal with the issue, because there are hundreds of millions of people in Northern Africa, in Sahel Africa, that are unhappy with their living conditions, and they see prosperous Europe as their goal, and obviously Europe with our social standards, so to say, kind of what we promised to the society, we're unfortunately unable to offer that to everybody who joins in. So it is difficult. And the last point of this about migration is that there are, again, bad actors who are working to instrumentalize migration. In Sahel, in Mali, and so many other countries, Russia's Wagner, private mercenary group, they're very active there. Creating instabilities, removing governments, changing governments, organizing coups and whatever, and that also adds up to migration flows, because people just, they just kind of live in this environment which is unstable, and they tend to move, and for them, where they would move is easier. So. Again, I mean, this is very closely connected to the sentiments of the voters, and again, we will see how this works out.
I want to be respectful of your time. I don't know what your time frame is. One more question. Okay. So I won't take it. Gentleman in the back.
Yeah, as our presidential election approaches, we're looking at a rematch. And I'm wondering, what would the victory of one candidate or the other mean for Lithuania?
That's a question I'm getting every single day while I'm here. And it's the one that I cannot answer you, sir. Well, the thing is that we are not participating in the US election. We're just a polite observer, and we're anxious. I can tell you that, but this is as far as I can go. The only thing is that one of the missions that I have, with me on my trip here, is to tell the story why the transatlantic link is vital for the security and safety of my country, of Europe, and also the United States. To tell that story for whichever administration would win, that at least we've managed to get our message through. Now we need this connection. It's imperative. We have to keep it strong. It made Europe strong. It helped us get back on the map. It helped us thrive for 3 decades. And if it's there, I'm sure that we will thrive for decades to come. If it gets weaker, if it changes, if the new reality is born, I'm worried for the world.
All right, so I want to thank the Foreign Minister of Lithuania. frustrated that we were not respectful enough that the ambassador of Lithuania to the United States is also here. So we appreciate your presence as well. Thank you to the students of the Alexander Hamilton Society and the Political Science Department for hosting this. Thanks for coming. Thanks so much.
Thank you.